Dr. Pranav J. Patar, PhD, Chief Executive, Global Foundation for Advancement of Environment and Human Wellness, to come up on the stage. I would also like to request our other distinguished speakers, Dr. Fazia Tarannum, Assistant Professor, Terry School of Advanced Studies. Mr. Raman VR, Head of Policy, WaterAid India. Mohammad Mazharul Haq, Managing Director, Oasis WFS Private Limited. Mr. Chinnaya Math, CEO, Nimble Vision Private Limited. And Mr. Ganesh Shankar, Founder and CEO at Fluxgen Technologies. Over to you, Dr. Pranav.
After a year-long hiatus, we are back in physical format again. And I would like to thank the organizers, especially Aarti, for inviting us all over for this special session today on efficient water management. Smart Cities Expo India has been a major program in the Asian radar of environmental events. And this is, has been able to bring together people like all the esteemed speakers that we have on the dais today to talk about issues of efficient water management. Of course, we all know the importance of water in our life, in our ecosystem, in the planet. We say it's a fundamental right, it's a fundamental element for our survival. But the biggest question is, are we treating it as a fundamental responsibility? So that has been the biggest challenge. The moment we talk about water management, if we are not looking water as a fundamental responsibility, the management of water cannot be as efficient as it should be. Today, we have an esteemed panel, a great group of people experienced in their own respective field when it comes to water sector, starting from the academia to development sector, from the industries to technology-based interventions in water management. We have doyens of water sector right here in this stage today. I am very hopeful that this panel will be able to bring together a concluding solution to address our problem today. Today, if we look at the world as a whole when it comes to water, the challenge of water is becoming enormous, becoming critical day by day. It is perhaps, according to me, it is, although we constantly talk about environmental challenge like changing climate, but water challenge is no lesser than climate change today. Although in the environmental context, in the planetary context, water and natural ecosystem and climate change, these three things are very interlinked. These are interdependent elements. But unfortunately, we have not been able to, despite best of the efforts at various levels, whether we talk about the government agencies, development sector organizations, academic institutions, but we have not been able to put together a sustainable solution so far. A lot of people question, what is the point of having forums like this, discussion panels like this, if we are not able to bring about solutions? But one thing, if you have noticed, in last few years, whether we see it or don't see it, whether we like it or don't like it, this kind of forums are able to also generate a ripple effect across various domains of the society. And also, if you look at this event itself, Smart Cities Expo program, this was started coinciding the Smart Cities program of the flagship Smart Cities program of Government of India. And this program alone has been able to create a bigger outreach across domains in the country today. And that is the very reason. And if we look at the solutions as such, since this program was started since last few years, I'm sure maybe hundreds or maybe thousands of people have gotten into this field, be it as an entrepreneur, be it as a solution finder, be it as a researcher on water issues. So we cannot deny the importance of these kind of elements. It pains me often when I think of India as a water crisis country. Despite world's one of the richest in terms of biodiversity and ecosystem countries in the world, we are struggling with our water today, water resources today. India has been bestowed with enormous amount of water resources, be it lakes, be it ponds, be it rivers. We have it everywhere. It is literally, the entire geography is literally crisscrossed by the rivers and water bodies. But what has happened to our water bodies today? You pick up any statistics, you look at any data, whether it is government source or non-government source. It indicates only one thing: water resources are on the decline. It is on the verge of disappearance. If we just look at Delhi alone, if you are aware about the Delhi statistics about urban water resources, the freshwater bodies, lakes and ponds, it has declined literally by 70 to 80% in last 25 to 30 years. I remember we were doing a kind of survey of our water resources in Delhi, and I had physically gone to look at, in fact, not look at, in fact, to locate. So some of these water bodies listed on our official database, and those were not to be seen anywhere. They are not they don't exist anymore. So that is the kind of problem that we face in the urban areas today. I'm glad that Smart Cities program happened. Smart Cities program, I mean, at the government front, and also at this expo happened, because this has been able to highlight this kind of challenges that we are facing on a day-to-day basis. In fact, the biggest challenge, according to me, in the water industry today is the crisis that we are facing, not only in terms of disappearance of water bodies. We are facing a bigger challenge in terms of the quality. So whatever little amount of water left, whatever little amount of water bodies left, whether river or lakes, ponds, whatever, but the quality is also going and degrading on a drastically. It's dramatic. The way we are destroying our water bodies, it's dramatic. I mean, I often wonder, in the human beings are, such an intelligent, wise species, living being on this planet, and we have, despite respecting these resources, which is rare, which is something we can't create, we are out there destroying them day in and day out. You look at water bodies today, you go to any place today, whether not just urban areas, even rural areas, they are being destroyed right, left, and center. Now, people, I mentioned that climate change is and water; these two are equally important and equally critical for our survival. We just can't do away saying that we are doing enough to address and mitigate climate change and then forget about water bodies. If the water bodies don't exist, we will lose all our chance to survival, because there's in biology, in ecosystem studies, there's something called ecosystem services. A single water body, the services it can offer to our to direct and indirect services, the benefits that we receive, whether it is for drinking purpose, whether it is for microclimatic control, whether it is for to support the surroundings, the nearby areas, this services is enormous, and more than that, the life it can endure. A single, even right in the school days, when we were introduced to the idea of ecosystem, the first thing we were taught, the first example we were taught was the pond. Despite that, we have not been able to realize the importance of our water body. So the challenge is enormous. We can go on and on and on. It's a never-ending business. But what we need today is sustainable solutions to all of these, all these problems. So that is the reason we have this very, very bright, very learned panel today. Like I said before, absolutely amazing bunch of people we have. So they're going to talk and deliberate on this issue of water efficient management. Before I hand over the floor to our esteemed speakers, I would like to just say only one thing. So we need both this, because water is an enormous issue. If we just look at only quality or maybe quantity, it will not be enough. Both these solutions, both these problems should be addressed simultaneously and together. There are a lot of things happen at isolated front. You know, standalone activities happening, projects happening, people are doing pilot studies. But the time is already past. India cannot afford to have only pilot scale projects anymore. We need large scale demonstration with large scale implementation of these solutions. And on when the Smart Cities program was introduced, you know, only thing that came to my mind was, why has it been called smart cities? Can we call it sustainable cities? You know, because a city cannot be smart if we don't include the element of sustainability. Smartness doesn't necessarily mean, you know, introducing or developing infrastructure, but those infrastructure has to be environment friendly, sustainable, and should be able to address our concerns regarding water, regarding climate change. So with this note, I would like to now invite Dr. Fauzia to give our insight on issues around urban infrastructure, blue and green spaces, and also touch upon the issues of gender, because gender is a very important element altogether. Although when it comes to environmental management, not just water management, often we, you know, somehow neglect that domain, but that domain has a very important role to play. The ladies, the women folk, the females of the society has a larger role to play, and they can do wonders in saving our water resources. So thank you very much. Over to Dr. Fauzia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pranab. And a very good afternoon to all of you. It's good to see, and I'm sure you are as delighted as I am here, speaking in person to all of you. And as Dr. Pranab was mentioning, that we inherited a lot of water resources from our forefathers. And probably it's our generation, within this span of 30, 40 years, we have brought our water resources to such a point that we are standing here and talking about it and wondering what to do. So a lot of it has to do with the piped water system, but a lot of it has also got to do with community getting completely disconnected with the water resources. So in our country that used to treat water as sacred and worshipped water, today many of us, and I'm sure many of you sitting here, would not be knowing what is the source of the water on your taps. So probably when you go back today, it would be interesting to find out that from where is your water coming and from what distance is your water coming. So coming to the topic for today, which is of course, and this expo, that is smart cities. So smart cities actually started around 2014-15 was the time when it was launched. And it was we actually thought that we could make 100 cities smart. So when we say smart, basically it's about using or leveraging technology to integrate and optimize on the already depleting resources that we have, how best we can actually use it. Today, when we stand at 2021, we haven't made much way, and all of you are aware of it, that maybe about 14-15% of progress, and now we say that, okay, we'll focus on 20 cities first, and at least aim at making 20 cities smart by 2023. 5 key indicators that we have when it comes to smart cities. The first is livability. So how good we make it for people to live, how are we able to provide basic services to people. The second one is on citizen engagement or citizen empowerment, I would say, that it's not just about providing them water or providing them energy, but also providing them good healthcare and education. The third is about environment, of course, where, of course, all this water and biodiversity, which Dr. Pranav was talking about, and then governance. I think what we severely lack is definitely governance. We have a government, but we often confuse between government and governance. Governance, when it comes to governance, you know, when we make policies, how best we are able to operationalize those policies. So probably that gap is a huge thing, and today we have speakers on digital technology. I think they would also be able to throw a lot of light on that how technology can be used to provide better governance, mobility and economy. So I'll touch upon two things right now. One is livability and the other one is environment. So by 2030, it is estimated that cities would contribute almost 75% to the GDP. So if cities have to contribute this much, obviously there will be a lot of structural transformation that would happen. Already we have lost, as Pranav was mentioning, almost 80%, you know, of our green spaces. So it's like built up area is now 80%, and we have green areas which have shrunk to almost about 20%. Also by 2030, we'll have almost about 600 million people living in cities, and of which 140 million people would be living in large cities like Delhi, that we have Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai. So that's another thing, and 50% population living in cities by 2050. So are we really equipped in terms of our infrastructure, both water infrastructure, but overall in terms of healthcare education, to really cater to that kind of a population? So I'll take an example of Chennai first. So Chennai, we know 2015, it actually saw an urban flooding, a severe flooding phenomenon. And the same city in 2019 was almost struggling with water. It was day zero in Chennai in 2019. So what did Chennai do? How did it actually bring itself to that state? So in 1980, Chennai again had almost about 20% of built up area, but today it has got 85% of built up area. So systematically, most of our green spaces or ponds that we have had, we have actually tried to destroy them, neglect them completely, and at the same time block all hydrological channels or all the natural channels which used to bring water to these ponds. We have, or tanks which was there, we have been able to destroy all of them. And water, how it has transformed is, probably we see it in Delhi also, from tanks to tankers. And now tankers have become more like a, you know, it's like, the profit that they are making from the borewell owner probably only has about 40 rupees he must be spending on drawing the water, and that tanker gets sold in cities for 1200 or 1400 or 800, depending on the kind of city that you are. So it's a big mafia that has come up that's also actually impeding our focus on the water. And then talk of wastewater, we treat only about 70% of our wastewater, domestic sewage, and 50% of our industrial sewage. And most of it goes into our water bodies. Then non-revenue water. So wherever we have utilities also which are there, they work at 60% efficiency. So we are not able to collect money. Almost like the loss that we have is about 40% on an average in Indian cities. And also the economic instruments. So why is it that we are happy to pay even 10,000 rupees per month for having our energy supply or energy services in our house, but when it comes to water, why is it that we are using the right economic instruments? Why can't we have progressive pricing? So people who live in urban slums, they end up paying 100 rupees per day for their water, and people like you and me pay 200. Some of us in Delhi don't pay also, because we have, you know, for 20,000 liters and below, you don't have to pay for the water. So we are not valuing our water appropriately also. While already water is now being traded on the Wall Street with oil, and it is getting with gold, but somewhere we lack valuing our water. Also, our urban cities, you know, they have, because we have encroached upon our green-blue spaces, the urban heat island effect that we talk of. So the temperatures of the cities, average temperature has also gone up by 0.5 degree to 1 degree Celsius. So it's very important. So what are the problems that we have? Now, when you concretize a space, you actually reduce the infiltration that is there. So if you have a green area, whatever the amount of rain that you get, almost 50% of the water gets infiltrated, and the balance goes for runoff and evapotranspiration. But when you have concrete spaces, you have just about 15%. So from 50 to 15% is what we reduce. The other thing is also about blue-green spaces. When you have the urban flooding phenomenon that we are talking about. So Delhi, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Cochin, you name a city, Mumbai, you name a city, and we are all struggling so much with urban flooding. And these are cities which had so many wetlands. India had almost about 750,000 wetlands, which were repositories for water. So blue-green infrastructure, actually, we are able to sort of augment them or rebuild them vis-a-vis the grey infrastructure which we have been focusing on. We'll be able to arrest floods. We can be able to regulate temperature, groundwater recharge. So our groundwater is depleting at an alarming rate. Economic growth, we can see. Cultural restoration. So if places look nice and beautiful, then people feel like going there, walking, talking to that beautiful space, engaging with it, ensuring that it remains, it remains well maintained. And of course, energy optimization. So we did a project in Gurgaon, which was, so last August, if some of you remember, the Gurgaon received almost about 125 millimeters of rainfall in a very short duration of about I think 24 hours, less than 24 hours, and there was a massive flooding on the Golf Course Road. Now the government was planning to make some more concrete structures or stormwater drains to really allow this water to flow. That was the time there was an NGO there which invited us to do a study. And when we went and looked at the Golf Course Road, we realized that there were 4 very beautiful natural streams coming from the Aravalis, and there were creeks, what they call 1, 2, 3, 4, which were there. So the moment it enters the city, you have these DLF apartments which have come up on these creeks. So you are actually obstructing the water completely. At the same time, these apartments who were asked to actually carry out rainwater harvesting, most of the rainwater harvesting have gone dysfunctional, and all the water from the apartments are also landing on the road. So, and then these creeks, we also found a lot of construction debris which was there, wastewater being discharged. So we gave a very comprehensive plan on different kinds of, I would say, interventions which are there in terms of rain gardens, in terms of infiltration trenches alongside the road, then also catchment basin in the upstream of it, so that a lot of water gets arrested there itself. Within the creek, you can go for gabion structures that is there. So, and then stream daylighting. So a lot of our stormwater drains we have boxed. So when we box it, we actually release our sewage, also large chunk of sewage into our stormwater drains as well. So government did accept a lot of the proposals that we have provided them, and they are actually trying to, they've already started, I would say, implementing a lot of it. Now coming to the gender perspective, if you look at, the water sector is primarily male dominated. And I don't have to speak much. You can look at the panel and you can actually, the panel speaks for itself, that it is highly male dominated. So you will see very little representation of women in the bureaucracy, or for that matter in the utilities. Now there are very specific needs of women which can be actually brought out. If you have, not women alone, I would say all gender types, including marginalized community. So not all women are definitely underprivileged. I definitely don't count myself in that. So I would say all marginalized communities. So it's very important that you have an equal representation of everybody in the policy making. Now when I was talking about the population increase, you will see cities will face a lot of migration, further migration. So we already have a lot of migrant population, and they are living in urban slums. Now urban slums do not have right to city. So when they don't have right to city, they don't have access to utilities like water and electricity. Sometimes if electricity is there, for water they have to queue up at public standposts for long hours. So that actually adds to the drudgery of women, because women are 95% of the time responsible for managing domestic water. So their involvement, I would say, in the policy making should be huge. A national water policy doesn't talk about gender integration at all. It talks about, does talk about women, but it has just got one instance where it has got women written in the policy, which says specific needs of women, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe should be taken into consideration while planning. So that's the kind of reference that it has to women. So whereas a lot of it is there in the National Policy for Women 2016, but we need to subsume the specific needs of different sections of the society within the main policy. And there was a study by McKinsey which said that if women participate on equal basis with men, it would add US $3 trillion to the nation's economy by 2025. So we definitely need gender disaggregated data. We need enabling environment also. It's not why women don't take up jobs, is also because they don't get the right kind of safe spaces and enabling environment. And gender financing, of course. So as Pranav was also mentioning, these resources, what we are talking about or what we are aiming at, these are interconnected. They cannot be looked in isolation. So it's very important that we adopt a systems thinking approach if we are really looking at how sectoral benefits are happening because of introducing the smart city concept. Thank you. I think with that, I'll stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Fauzia. This is indeed very crisp and brief. We quickly touched upon a very important area altogether. That is urban blue-green spaces, and you've also touched upon issues like, you mentioned a very important thing that, it is now being traded as a commodity now. Obviously, since there's a huge need for safe water, I mean, not just for drinking, but safe water, clean water. So there's a huge demand. So it is now being traded, and in fact, the profit ratio is very high. I mean, if you invest, there was a report I was studying recently. It says, if you invest $1 in the water sector, the return of investment would be $7. So which is absolutely huge. So obviously, since there's a need and demand for water resources, so obviously it is also doing well in the business. So with this note, now I would like to invite Mr. Raman from WaterAid, and he's going to talk about a very important issue altogether: water policies, challenges and solutions of drinking water supply in small and medium towns with reference to equitable urban water management and related policies. This is a very important area altogether, because when it comes to efficiency, because as we all know that, there's not much water left. The resources are gone or dying. So obviously, we need a better and very, very efficient management system to be able to provide that. There's a huge demand and very, very little resources we have. Over to you, Mr. Raman. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pranab. This topic that I am going to speak now, even I was not very much aware about this topic if you asked me 2-3 years before. Because small and medium towns are such unattended and less understood kind of entities in the urban landscape. So unless and until our policy attention and program attention is properly going into this segment of urban areas, it is going to be very difficult for talking about comprehensive development in setting like India. Because almost 4,600 or more, around 4,700 municipalities are there. Within that, our focus is going into less than 100. So around 4,500 towns are broadly falling into this category. In that, sorry, even in that, around No worries, thank you. So even in that, if you see that around 4,500, another 500 will be getting benefits and coverage of some of the specific schemes, but again some 4,000 towns are left. So this is something to be, noted and highlighted at the policy level, so that very important focus that is needed for this segment of towns are given. So we did a study of 6 towns across India covering 6 states. So 6 may not be a representative sample for 4,500 or whatever, but these 6 are giving us very diverse understanding about how in detail we need to look at, from policy perspective, this segment of urban areas. So some of the contexts are, one is this is an emerging, so 5,000 also is a town, and 500,000 is also a town when it comes to the population. So this classification of population, sometimes it varies like anything in this 4,000 towns that I am talking about. And the schemes like Amrut is not covering them. Not all of them, some of them are covered. Whichever is having a specific population and beyond, they are covered. And they don't have sufficient technical, institutional or financial capacities. So governance you were mentioning, Fausia. So this is important that in terms of governance, the governability of these towns are problematic. And then visibility deficit I already talked about. And there is a silver line that the Jal Jeevan Mission is going to cover this, these towns. And we don't know, unlike the other cities and large towns and some medium towns, we know the urban poor settlements, how they are in these cities. But in these small towns, this is an amalgamated situation, a mixed situation. And then solid and liquid waste management, we don't know how this will happen, particularly in these settings. So that makes these settings dirtier and visibly unclean when it comes to other, compared to other towns. And also one important other thing is that not only government, NGOs, industry and academia, all attention towards this segment is very poor. So we looked at these 6 cities. I'm just giving a gist of it. I'm not going to give into the details because all these cities are something that you can find out. And so some of them made have become cities in as early as 1995, 1956, and some of them are very recent, like 2005. So that is also an issue. Age of these towns are also varying. So some of them are very old, but population is not increasing. Some of them are very new because of the population explosion that is happening. So if you look at the water sources, what we found is that around 30.3% of water sources are private overall. But if you look at Bakshi Ka Talab in Lucknow and UP, 73% of the water sources are private. When it comes to Palam Nair, 86 is public, and only there is no private water supply at all in Palam Nair. So this is something, so when we are reforming the water supply situation, it is very important to understand how will we reform water supply situation. Now, who is having access at the household level? This also leads to the gender question that you were talking about, because unless and until we address the gender issues, the carrying of the water from public standpoints to households, it is always girls and women. So this is something to address as well. So if you see that overall 43.2% don't have access at the household level. Again, within the people who is having access at the household level, around 30% are private. I mean their own sources. It can be borewell, it can be pumped water within their households or dug well, whatever. But they are private. So that means the Jal Jeevan Mission's target can be broadly 70% or something like that in these towns. So that is something that we need to really understand. Now coming to looking at the economic and social categories of who is not having access. So that is where, if you can look at BPL, 59 or 60% of BPL people are not having access at household. So there is an importance to look at equity measures here. And similarly, if you look at caste-wise, ST 38% and ST 15%. Together, again, this forms more than 50% of non-access are coming from SC, ST and then OBC. That is how it is. And women issues, I already told the gender issues, the burden of not having access at household level is paid by women. So that is something to be understood. Then the supply situation, if you see Palamner, it is one of the water, drought prone area in Andhra Pradesh. So if you see that they are supplying water once in 2 days, and the Jal Jeevan mission is talking about uninterrupted functional household level tap connection. So distance is to be understood. And similarly, if you look at Dindori, that is once a day, 1 hour. But Chandbali, they are supplying twice a day, but for 8 hours. So there is a long distance to travel for these towns for reaching uninterrupted water supply. That is what we are looking at. Now, water quality. That is also one major issue. If you look at, I've divided them into chemical and bacteriological. If you see the chemical part of it, TDS 37%, hardness 68%, alkalinity 70%. So we collected 40 samples each from all these towns and tested in an NABL laboratory. And then coming to coliforms, total coliform is 75%. And fecal coliform 39% almost, and E. coli is 39% almost. So this is how the water quality is, and it is important to note that none of these towns are having any systems for testing water quality. And if you look at protocol and practice, that is fine, and also only 18% of households are deploying any filtration at their level. So that means around 82% of people are consuming non-filtered water, which is obviously contaminated. So this is something to be looked at. And then looking at how sanitation is contributing to water quality, that is also something very interesting to look at. So you can see what kind of sanitation technology is used, and most of them have capacity to penetrate and go into drinking water sources. 84% of the water sources are not in a safe horizontal distance from water, toilet substructures as per the WHO water safety norms. So that is something to be looked at. Then they have only 80% of people are having access to household toilets, so 20% gap is to be covered despite SBM. So that is something that they are planning through community toilets and all that. It is coming up. And vacant plots in these areas are dump yards. So they don't have their own systems. All the vacant plots are filled with waste and dump and wastewater and all that. And FSM grey water solutions or wastewater solutions are not there. Water bodies are not protected, and the sanitation workers protection is not in the consideration of municipalities as of now. So this is where we need to look at these town segments. So one is we need to look at differential guidelines and financing under the JJM for each category of the small and medium towns, and a special mission like Amrut or whatever may be needed for just looking at small towns, medium towns separately. And technical supports arrangements are a must. Currently, the technical support arrangements are all the agencies, international or national, will go into where things are visible, not necessarily into where things are needed. So the need-based technical support should be giving way for visibility-based technical support is something that we need to look at. And consumption and regulation of water sources, consumption-based regulation, metering, those kinds of arrangements are to be looked at. Protection of water bodies, we have programs, but we need to focus on these towns, whether that is happening or not. And wastewater management system, water quality laboratories and systems are important to be introduced in these areas with sufficient human resources and also other capacities, institutional capacities, and then mapping of urban poor, including ensuring community participation for various initiatives. And I would stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raman, for quickly touching upon that very, very critical domain altogether when it comes to water efficient management. Obviously, India lacks a major emphasis on town planning. And when I say town planning, it should also consider planning for efficient water management that includes treatment and supply and procurement, of course, from respective sources. And that lacks, and obviously from the statistics that he has shared, we can see the difference. In the urban areas, we are still fortunate enough to have access to safe drinking water, but when it comes to urban areas, the challenge is alarming. With this note, I would like to invite Mr. Mazrul Haq to say a few words about smart cities and water management and supply, and with special note to a very solution-oriented work that he is doing by promoting drinking water fountains. Over to you, Mr. Haq.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Water management is always a challenge, and especially when we talk to the drinking water management, making it more efficient by adapting new technologies and methods which are being used across the globe and implementing them, not lagging so far the timeline. See, when we are talking about the things like governance and sustainability, I am from a town that is called Bhagalpur, and it is in Bihar. I even recall those days when there are wells and people start getting the water from the well with the pulley. And it was really one of the great achievement. Once from 52 meter of the depth of the well, we get one bucket of water, and we earned that water, and that was really pleasant. Yeah, that was really pleasant that we earned that amount of water, and then we take care that water to a level we need to utilize in a efficient manner, so we can utilize them for a better way. Don't waste the water. Now we are surrounded with the technologies. We have showers, we have everything, we have every surrounded by us, and we use the water without any care, and we hardly think about the waste management of water. We Oasis since 1910, we are in a business where we purify the water, we keep on cooling the water, and we dispense the water. For Indian market, we are mostly in commercial places, but in European and US market, even we are in household places. There is a big differences in different markets. When we are talking about US market and European markets, Middle East and India, when we go to Europe visit, the sustainability approach is equally right for every place. Either it is a remote area from maybe from Dublin to Mayo, which is having a suburb areas, you will find equal level of the water quality supplied. Either it is a B ton, A ton, or maybe other ton. There is hardly any categorization that they have different amenities. Amenities are equal around the entire country, and they give the guarantee that whatever the municipal corporation are working and the water quality supplied across each and every house is as better as you compare to any of the Bisleri or Aquafina water, and you may find there might be chances of getting contaminated water from the sources of plastic or sun exposure when it goes into transportation with the bottled water, and our water is better and safer than those water. So when we go for the governance, and in India what we find, the governance should be in a pattern where we are expending lots of money, and as a efficient and efficiency should be measured. What is the efficiency? If we talk, efficiency is something that we say the output by input. Whatever the inputs are there and the output is coming, that give a level of measurement of efficiency. When we talk about the efficiency, I think I will speak a little more than the time allotted to me, because yeah. So when we talk about the efficiency, I went to many projects live across India. Early in 2009, I can say, when I started 8 or 9, when I started Oasis in India, and we found there are drinking water sources which are being utilized in most of the high premium places like airports and maybe any public places or other places. they were using drinking water cooler, big water cooler, which may have a 200 liter of reservoir, and a compressor which is operating maybe at 200 watt power consumptions, and they have a disposable cups and dustbin nearby. So, and there is a person who is mopping and replacing those cups, and by the end of the day they are putting all the garbage back to the system. So these are the inputs that were supposed to be there at that time. So when I met with them, why not we come with a solution where we reduce those inputs in the term of we reduce the size of the cooler. While people start drinking the water, they can use the real time cooling. So we reduce the energy consumption at the same time, because that water need cooling all the time, and 200 liter reservoir, so power consumption is very high from our end. And again we can remove those dustbin nearby, and we can remove those disposable cups as well. So these all can be reduced as an input, and we can get a better efficient water management in terms of drinking water. So that was a concept that I was repeatedly insisting to the consultant, architect, and the project planner when I meet with them. Slowly, it stuck with the things, and we started with some of the airports. Now, luckily, I think we are approximately covering 40 airports in India. And if you see the data, last project we covered with the Archaeological Survey of India, that in 2008 we have been called, and they told that in Taj Mahal there are approximately in 2009 5.6 million visitors were noted in Agra Taj Mahal. And now if we say 50% of them are carrying single one-time use plastic bottle within the premises, and they have the bins and the collection centers, and those goes outside. So they told, why not we should go with another system from which we can be free from one-time use plastic. And it was an Archaeological Survey of India, and I think Supreme Court is monitoring that particular project. So we have to take several permissions and all for that, and with the support of archaeological team there in Agra. And we implemented almost 20 location has been identified, and we implemented this drinking water fountain in early 2019. And even if we see if 5.6 million of people are coming, at least we are saving half of the, let's say, to 3 million of the disposable glasses or one-time use plastic bottle. And at the same time, if I give the data for the airports, top airports, IGI 67.3 million passengers noted in 2019. Mumbai Airport 45.87 million. Hyderabad 32.36 million. And Chennai 22.26 million passengers traveling across. So if we see as a contribution, as an input, what we did, that goes to a huge contribution as an input and cost reduction. If we consider 20% or 30% of the data who are supposed to drink with the system that we provided in the airports and public places. So that way we are contributing for the conservation of water by making it more efficient in terms of the reducing the input. Apart from this, Oasis always focus on the filtration and cooling and technological advancement. What we did in when we go for the filtration in other markets, we have household filters. In general concept, the filters come with a plastic fixed filter which you use one time and throw it back to the environment. Recently, in last 3 years, we have the filters, even smaller filters have a small plastic, hard plastic casing, and only biodegradable elements can be used, either it is a sediment filter or carbon filter or any filters, and we throw those biodegradables to the back to the environment. So grain filters that we are working across, and that is also a cost factor. We are reducing the cost of that total plastics and making the environment free from the one-time use of plastics in terms of filters. When we talk as a project consultant, we always focus what kind of water we are using as per the World Health Organization guideline. The pattern what we are looking in India, the RO concept is too much. We are looking that every household now they having the RO, irrespective of the water quality. So when we see the entire project and we study the project, we recommend when to use and why to use the RO. If the recommendation come to use the RO, because reverse osmosis, what it does, it reduces the TDS level while it is coming from the municipal corporation water. So up to 500 TDS of the water we can drink, it is considered to be potable. And again, now the coming generation, they might have certain additional, calcium deficiency or maybe other mineral deficiencies in that. So for the specifically for the public places, we recommend the UV and certain set of filters who can serve the purpose, who can destroy the your microbiological elements and give certain level of filtration where the water is potable. We are using R600 gases in most of the coolers. R600 gases are more economical and they consume 25 to 30% less energies in term of cooling. So again, that is reducing the ODS substances in the ozone gases as well. We are also working for the another technologies that is called electric conductivity. So the research is going on for the thermoelectric conductivity. So we started small cooling devices for the household in Europe and other countries. Hopefully in the coming days we will be able to future the product with which is independent from the refrigerant, and there might be possibilities the ODS substance will not be impacting to the ozone layer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haq. In fact, technological intervention is a must now, given the kind of challenge that we are facing. So obviously, when we talk about solutions, technology plays a critical role. So on this note, I would like to invite Mr. Chinmay Amath. He's going to touch upon, in fact, it will be a further continuation of information technology intervention in the water sector. Over to you. Thanks.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. I am Chinmay Amath, CEO and co-founder of Bangalore, Nimble Vision. We are Bangalore-based IoT startup. We are into smart water management using IoT and AI. NEE is a platform what we have developed. So if you see, these two pictures, it represents the current situation in India. It has been more than 70 years after independence. Still, India is reeling under water insecurity. We have reached to Mars, but still we don't have a public tap in Bangalore. I live in IT capital of India. I don't have public tap. So this is the irony of India. And 90% of the rural India, still don't have a public tap. And these two pictures, real time, what is happening in India. We are, as Madam told already, what we saw at day 0 in India and Cape Town as well. We don't have water for drinking purpose itself. Why this is happening? Anybody has idea on this? Because in India, we don't have really any idea whether the people are really using it or wasting the water. I've been to multiple water expos like this, Chennai, Bangalore, Pune, and even Dubai as well. What I saw this, people, water is there, we are using it. But we really don't have idea whether we are really using it or wasting it. So this is where we found that the technology is a need of the hour to bring this awareness to every user. So that is the reason we have come up with a solution called NEE the Water Savior. So we combined a problem statement related to water, what we saw in India so far. The first thing is in India and other Asian countries, we have overhead tanks, underground tanks, where the water by gravity comes to each tap, flush or anything. The water gets distributed here. We don't have how many liters water is available. A lot of manual effort is required. You have to peek in, peek out and see the water level. And the most important thing is there is no way to understand what activities I am doing at home and how much water I am using it. And we have these conventional water meters which only give information only how much water came to my house, but how the water being used by anyone. Let's say I have a family of 4 people, me and my wife and 2 kids, and we are using water entire 24/7. How what activities are doing at home and how many liters is used by each activity. And usually what happens is my kids are very small, they keep the tap open. Or the flush, they do it in the wrong way and the water starts draining. We never come to know until both the tanks are empty. So these are the problems is part of every household in India, whether we have customers in Delhi, Pune, everywhere. So this is a problem statement what we have. And in Bangalore itself, the water leakage is 360 million liters per day. The BWSSB says this is the unaccounted water for them. They are spending 84 rupees per liter to get the water from all the way from Mysore to Bangalore, but they charge 8 rupees per liter. There is a lot of money, they lose it, and because of, imagine the amount of money they are losing because of all this unaccounted water. And government, and Niti Aayog says a lot of statements, but there is no real-time data them to validate what the statements are making. There is no way the pin code based, city based, village based data is real time is there. There is no data until today itself. So this is the infrastructure what we see in India and other Asian countries. Either it is a plastic tank or it is a cement tank. And manually and the automatic water level controls are there. What we thought is we need a solution which is a necessity of every building. It could be a home, it could be an apartment, it could be an industry, which is used to pump the water from underground tank to overhead tank. Why can't we make that itself as smart? So that is how the idea started, and that is the genesis of coming with Nimble Vision as a startup here. We made this water controller itself is smart, which gives you a smart data analytics, whether you are using the water or it is wasting the water. Every hourly consumption, each hour, how many liters you are using in your house, you can track. Who came to your house? Your maid comes to your home at morning 8 to 9. She washes utensils. How many liters she took? You took all your bath, all that stuff. How many liters you used? All that real-time data. Wherever you are, the data comes to you. And is there any leakage is happening? A real-time leakage detector. It helps you to close running tap or flush leaking, all that. And this is how the technology works. A overhead tank, the two sensors, one in overhead tank, one in underground tank. This is a water level controller. So the complete solution what we have is a smart water level controller and meter. There is no separate meter is required from our solution. It is for individual homes, apartment and industries, very rich graphic dashboards, a real-time leakage detector and quality detector. As sir told, actually the quality is very important in India. What we made is a water controller level with the quality parameters monitoring. TDS, PHV, ORP, chlorine, everything you can club with the water level controller itself. It's optional features. And we all use social network platform just to share our photos and videos. We thought, why can't we make a better use of social network platform? We came with a feature where, let's say, two users are there, madam and sir are the users. They both can compare their water consumption live on our platform. And they can share all their dashboards live to anybody on Facebook, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, anywhere you can share. And you can share all your best practice the whole world. That I am saving this much water, we are family of 4. As per the government mandate, we use only 130 liters per person per day, and that's all is our consumption. And for government, we can give live pin code based consumption, city based consumption, village based consumption on the fly. You don't have to do any manual survey. That is our solution USP. So now we have working on a solution where you see the connectivity is the biggest challenge. We are working on a solution which will work without internet, because we can't expect internet connectivity in rural India. But we are working on a solution which works without internet. And still all the data can be made live available. So this is our dashboard. If you see, the first one is a live tank. You can see it gives update for every 10 minutes. Each liters of water variation you can see live. And hourly consumption you can see. Each hour how many liters are used. Continuous breakup will give for the current day. That is the past details. Each day how many liters are used in last 3 years, 4 years, you can track it. A centralized way to track for B2B people. You have multiple properties across India or in same city. In a single mobile app, you can track every tank, every water tank. So these are web dashboards for B2B people, how they can track it. So this is the water savings, our already existing customers, how they are benefiting. A family of 4 people, before our solution, they are using more daily 600 liters and weekly 4,002 liters. Then it came by 30 to 50%. In Delhi also we have a customer. Earlier, 3 people, they were using 2,500 liters per day. There is a lot of wastage was there. Now with our solution, they have reduced the consumption by 500 liters per day. Even their electricity bill came 1/5 actually. So this is some stats, how we can help entire India, starting with a small family or village, the stats wise that. And what are the other derived benefits is less usage, less pumping, and less electricity. All that is benefits for this. And also the unaccounted water we can reduce. If you see in Bangalore, is all the unaccounted water, if you are able to detect it, we don't have to depend on the tanker supply itself. As sir also told it, we are dependent on tankers. Our solution, what additionally does is, it accurately tells the tanker guy how many liters he has filled in. That also is in our solution is available. Let's say tanker guy comes at evening 6 p.m. and how many liters films, it is a trigger for you, saying that he has firm head and he has filled these many liters for you. So social impact, we can help government and everybody who are interested in city-based, pin code-based consumption, and a social network platform to bring the awareness. That is a need of the hour. That is what I feel, that because when I interacted with many people, the data is the only way you can help people to educate. And that is what we have, a massive data analytics on water availability, water consumption, water wastage, and water quality. And a public water distribution. Currently, see the whole ecosystem, the billing, everything is done manually. With our solution, it can be completely automated. There is no way for you to go all the way to this booths and everything, pay bill. On the mobile phone itself, you can pay, and you can see all your past data as well in the mobile app itself. So we have built other variants when we participate other water expos, like the many people from RO industry and the swimming pool people came to me, say that how can you make it is more B2B oriented. Then we have come up with a platform which can automate any water pumping system from RO or a water purifier plant or a swimming pool or any pumping mechanism. It doesn't matter. It's the hot water, cold water, all that can be done automated with our solution. So we believe in one nation, one solution. So we have customers from Chennai, Bangalore, Pune, and even Delhi. So that's our solution, Need the Water Savior. So during the COVID time, we were sitting idle, what we should do? We came with a simple solution called Nivarak. It is a mobile-based thermometer which is Aadhaar card integrated. So we help people in remotely how the temperature can be taken remotely and that immediate data can be made available to the government. This we sold not only in India and outside India as well. So these are the awards we have been recognized or given for our effort in social impact and technology. Karnataka Elevate Grant, Bangalore Chamber of Commerce Grant, Pune Smart City Grant, Renesas, a Japanese chipmaker grant, and Bangalore Jalarushi Award for us. So finally, I would like to say, as Madam told, water is inherited. Rather, I go with Mahatma Gandhi, what he said, it is not inherited. We have learned from the future generation. So it is our responsibility that we should pass on this water to next generation without wasting it. So finally, I would say, conserve water, save life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Math. I would like to now invite Mr. Shankar. He's going to talk about water entrepreneurship and SDG. SDG 6 plays a critical role. In fact, that is the area which internationally covers concerns around water issues. Over to you, Mr. Shankar.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here. I mean, sitting in front of all the eminent people in this field, I feel really privileged to speak here. Thank you so much. I come from the city of Bangalore, a city which had more than 300 lakes. But when it came to my own life, I still remember in my primary school, when I was in primary school, we used to get water from tap. And there was actually a well at my home. Borewell. I mean, not a borewell, the well, normal well. And the water was visible from my eyes, like around, it was just around 10 to 50 feet, I could see the water. When the time I went to middle school, my father got a tank at home, water tank at home. And then we thought, okay, because water doesn't come every day, there's a need of tank, because even the well was dried up by the time I came to middle school. By the time I went to high school, my father also got a sump at home, because the number of people in the city were increasing. So the pressure was not in a position to get water to actually pump it to my tank directly, which used to happen before. So by the time I went to college, so he got one more tank, because the capacity in the sump was limited, and he wanted to make sure that we have more water. I mean, there's enough water for us. And by the time I went to my master's at the Institute of Science, I remember we were even getting water from tanker. This is the story of water I have seen. coming from a city which had the highest number of lakes, Bangalore, right? And it's very disheartening that it's just not the story of Bangalore, the story of the country. Okay? So with this context, I realized I should take up a career in water. When I have seen the problem in front of my eyes, it's a concern as a countryman, but it's an opportunity as an engineer. With that, I started FluxGen to solve the problems in sustainability and focusing mainly on water. Okay? Okay, now coming to how is it connected to the story I told? 50% of water meant for human use in cities actually goes for industries. I mean, because the pair of jeans that you wear consumes more than 7,000 liters of water for making one pair of jeans. So that means indirect water footprint of ours is much more than the water that we consume on a day-to-day basis, right? So does that mean if we solve the problem of industry, can it help? So I thought it will partially help, but definitely a very important step. While industries are buying water at the highest price, they also have to comply to zero liquid discharge. This makes it even more expensive for industries to manage water, right? The water, firstly, the cost of water is high, and on top of that, industries are supposed to recycle this water. So cost of recycling of water in many of these places is 3 times the cost of buying water, because if you are doing effluent treatment, there's a lot of chemicals involved in it. So that means the cost for the industry is already more for water recycling. On top of it, there's energy consumed in pumping, purifying, and various other processes like steam and various other things. So I realized this is a great opportunity. If we reduce water consumption in industries first, we are almost reducing significant amount of water available. We can increase the water for the residents because we are using the same aquifers. And at the same time, industries will be able to even save money because the cost for them on water is much higher compared to I and you at home. So with this we started providing our IoT and AI based solution for industries. We even chose industries which are the large guzzlers, like the food processing and beverage, and also hospitals. Like, while I heard from a very great doctor in a very reputed hospital said, we doctors, we hospital are here to heal, not to harm the environment. When I realized this, I told him, sir, then I have a solution for you to make sure that you don't have, even without your knowledge, you're harming. And that's when we decided to do this water management for industries and hospital segment. I should definitely thank the doctor for telling me that. So I'll tell you an example of one of the most reputed hospital in South India. It's called G. Kuppuswamy Naidu Hospital. Coming from South India, we used to be ruled by Wadiyars at one point of time. Even the Wadiyars used to get treated in this hospital, the rulers of South India. So this hospital was one of the most responsible hospitals I have actually come across, or one of the most responsible. I mean, most industries are, but many times they don't know how to be, and that's where we come. So they were consuming more than 200 kiloliters of water per day, and they were taking water from groundwater, and they were actually getting, during the times of summer, they were even getting water all the way from tankers, right? Tankers and various other sources. So there was a very economic value for them as hospital. They were spending money, and they were also feeling, while I hear this climate change and all those things, because there were very educated people in terms of climate change, they realized this climate change can even make it worse because of fewer rain days and intense rainfall activity. So realized that, okay, this is going to make it worse. With that, the hospital approached us, can you guys help us reduce our water consumption and de-risk us from this water crisis that is going to happen eventually? So we went there, we did a site survey, we understood the whole facility, and it's also another thing about hospitals, because the top of the management of hospitals are all doctors, some of the best doctors. But the engineering department is generally reporting to them. So many times the doctors need help from consultants and other people. So we went and told them, you could, if just like in your own industry or in your facility, without measuring, you don't take any step. Like that, here also, we need to put a MRI for your thing in terms of water management in a very metaphorical way. That we would like to monitor water at the end-to-end level, from the starting to the end, and understand how much water are you consuming from what place in all your facility. We put up the water monitoring at the borewell, at the sump, at the tanks, at individual parts of the hospital, whether it's the STP, ETP, or even the various departments like individual wards, raw water, reverse osmosis water. So we basically monitored all the water, including there are some places for dialysis, there are more water going in. So we monitored this and then started applying data analytics to it. By applying data analytics, we found out where there was leakage, wastage, excessive usage of water. After deploying our solution, they were able to reduce water by up to 50,000 liters. Okay, I should say we gave prescriptive alerts. What used to be a visual inspection to find out leakage, wastage, excessive usage, which would take 2 to 3 days, sometimes months to find out, they were able to identify in few minutes, and they were able to take action within half an hour. With this, they were able to reduce. In recognition of that, the hospital also won the CIA National Water Award within the fence category at CIA Triveni awarded them. We believe what we have done, this one of the facilities out of 50 other facilities we have actually deployed our solution. Just imagine, this hospital saved 50,000 liters of water per day. If we do the solution for all the 70,000 hospitals in India, we would be able to save 4 billion liters of water per day, which is 3 times the water consumed by whole of Bangalore, right? I started by telling the problem of Bangalore. Today I'm ending with the solution for Bangalore. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar. It's indeed a very interesting prospect that you have thrown about Bangalore water problem, especially to do with the hospitals. Hospitals also require water management, although we don't really consider hospital as something which also requires water management solutions. But yes, indeed, they are also a critical element. And one of the biggest challenges today is, when we talk about water solution efficiency, we end up picking up solutions which are not energy efficient. They are energy guzzlers. So that is another factor which now coming into play. So today we've heard a very wider perspective and had been able to gather information and knowledge about what is happening at the city level, what is happening at a rural level, what is happening in terms of smaller towns and cities, what's happening with the hospitals, what's happening in the urban, the public areas like airports, what's happening, what is being done by the IT. IT as an industry, it is very critical to the providing solutions to issues like water. So in the interest of time, we are not having a longer discussion today. I would like to throw a key words or term to each of you, and you'll have to conclude your session with one-liner. Okay, I'll start with Dr. Fozia. Water and gender.
I think integral to sustainable development.
Mr. Raman, water policy.
Policies need to consider the most vulnerable.
Mr. Haq, airports.
See, amenities need to be more sustainable for the future generations.
Information technology. Mr. Math.
Yeah, integrate conservation with data analytics.
Thank you. Mr. Shankar, entrepreneurship.
Country is having problems in water. That also means we have opportunity to build startups.
Thank you. Water today is like an upside down pyramid. Normally what happens is pyramid is standing on a larger base, but today water scenario is upside down. It's completely, other way around. So it is like that, and we don't have a lot of resources, but demand is growing phenomenally. There's tremendous amount of demand, There's tremendous, tremendous activities happening. Population is growing. We have industry requirement, which is even larger, but we don't have enough water. The water is limited, very, very limited, and it's shrinking day by day. So that is the reason we need solutions of that level. We need interventions at through IT, IoT. So with this note, I would like to thank our esteemed panel once again, and we really appreciate your time and your inputs today. And I personally found it very, very helpful, very, very informative. A lot of things that you mentioned today were eye-openers to me. I'm sure our audience also found it very useful. Thank you so very much for your time and inputs. And I also appreciate and thank Smart Cities Expo organizers. Thank you once again.
Thank you, speakers. Indeed, it was a very educative and informative session for all of us. I thank all of you, and we conclude the last session of 3 days of valuable and enlightening sessions of networking in person that we've had after a year of virtual events. And I now request our moderator, Dr. Pranab, to please facilitate all the speakers with the memento on behalf of Exhibitions India Group. I'll start with Dr. Fauziata Ranno. Can we all have a round of applause? Mr. Raman VR. Mohammad Mazharul Haq. Mr. Chinay Ahmad. And Mr. Ganesh Shankar. I would now request Mr. Karun Saluja, Group Head, Exhibitions India Group, to please felicitate Dr. Pranab with a memento. And we would also like to have a group photograph of all the eminent speakers here.